Hi, my name is David Brown. I have a blog called Trendy Troodon where I write about dinosaur toys, among other things. And this is my first video about dinosaur toys. And I'm specifically going to cover the worst dinosaur toy that I own. Now, to get into this, I need to give a little bit of context. Now, there's a type of dinosaur toy that I call a bigmouth, and this is a pretty typical example. It's supposed to be a velociraptor, which makes it look sillier. Otherwise, it's really a pretty generic dinosaur, and you can see what I'd call the bigmouth characteristics. For example, it's pretty flexible, not as much as some. If I'm squeezing it, there's a bit of resistance, but it'll give. And the big thing is that at the front end, there's this big open mouth. If you look straight into the mouth, you'll see that it opens right into the hollow body. Now, these are still around, but they're not nearly as common. Their peak was definitely in the 1980s. They would have been probably around in the 70s. And here's a few other examples that are fairly good. This is sort of a generic ankylosaur or solidosaur. It's a glow-in-the-dark figure. I had this in the 1980s. And again, you can see the open mouth. And also, when I press, there's quite a bit of give in the body. And you might notice it could look just a little lopsided, and that's a big problem I'm going to cover. Some of these things could just have gone a little bit distorted with age. The plastic contracts, gets hard. This guy has a little bit of a tear in his mouth, but still, it's not too bad. You can at least certainly see what it's supposed to be. And here's maybe the best one. I'm sure it was originally from the same manufacturer as the one I just showed. I picked this one up at a used bookstore. And in hindsight, it really looks a bit like a cryolophosaur. It's got this funny little crest at the top. Now, it has the tripod stance on a theropod, which we wouldn't do now, but it's still about what people thought dinosaurs were like, at least through the 60s and 70s. There's some good detailing on the skin, and if you look in the mouth, you'll see the hollow space, but just looking straight in, all you'll see is the back of the head. It goes from there down into the body. Now, there are some dinosaurs that have big mouth characteristics, but aren't quite the same. Here's just a fantasy creature from a company called Imperial. The main thing in common with the big mouth is that it's made of a very flexible material. And those heads look like big mouths, but the big difference, if you push a finger in or look inside, there's a closed back to each head. And this is another one that looks a little like a big mouth. Again, it has a solid or closed back of the mouth. And it's also a pretty rigid material, more so than any of the others I've been showing in this video. Now, here's the one that has the big problems. It looks just like another generic ankylosaur or solidosaur. Yes, so it has the big mouth, but you can also see the body armor as spikes. Now, where the problems start is that the head looks a bit funny. The top of the head is smaller than it should be, and the eye can be a little hard to see. Yes, it's right there if you're looking for it. Yeah, and this is where the problems get more serious. If you look at it from this side, the top of the head looks even smaller, and the eye is maybe even a bit more out of place. And the real problems are if you look at this from the front. Now you can see this is wildly asymmetrical. The jaw is skewed completely to one side. And this is something that might be partly the result of distortion, but even factoring that in, you can see that both sides of the head are completely mismatched. And if it did get more asymmetrical with age, that's still just magnifying problems that must have been there from day one. I can't say when this was made. It looks like it could be from the 1980s, maybe the 90s, but I doubt much later than that. Here's the top view. One more thing you can see. Usually, toys will have a seam in the middle. Here, even that is completely off center. Bottom line, this, I'm giving another close-up, is so awful. I swear it would be harder to do this on purpose than to actually get it mostly right. Yeah, so all-time low for dinosaur toys. Just for comparison, I've done a lot about the Pachysaurs. They're the complete fantasy dinosaur-like creatures. They were used in Dungeons and Dragons. This is way worse than the Pachysaurs, and the worst part is it's supposed to look like a regular dinosaur that people would be familiar with. It's not just a made-up fantasy creature like this. And it's not even one where we revised our reconstructions like we did with the theropods. It's just a dinosaur that has the worst possible shape. And that will be enough for the video. I'm probably going to do more. And I definitely look forward to any feedback from this. Also, I will include a link to my blog post on bigmouth. So it's been good to do this, and I'll definitely be looking at doing them more on toy dinosaurs.